It is not gold and silver appreciating. It is the value of the currency going away. We are absolutely at the end of this fiat money life cycle, period, end of discussion, and I can prove it. You divide the debt by all the gold, and that gives you a number which is about $38,000 in change. So at $5,000 or $5,400 or $20,000 or $30,000, it's a bargain. It should be a wake-up call for everybody, except that we've gone too far, that there really is no way out other than a major crisis and a shift into a new system. I foresee a global hyperinflationary depression. The stablecoins will be used to engineer and generate the hyperinflation. Has actually already begun. It's just not yet publicly visible.
Welcome to the Microscopic Podcast presented by GoldRepublic. My name is Alexey Joranov, and in this format I invite you to look at the world through different lenses to see what's hidden in plain sight. My guest today is Lynette Zang. Lynette has spent more than 5 decades studying currencies, markets, and monetary systems, from working inside banking and brokerage to analyze the full life cycle of fiat currencies. She's best known for her work on currency debasement, gold as sound money, and what historically happens when monetary systems reach their end stages. At a time when debt, deficits, and central bank credibility are all under pressure, Lynette brings a long-term historical lens to a question of what comes next and how individuals can prepare for it. It's a real big honor and pleasure to welcome you to the show, Lynette.
Oh, well, back at you, Alexei. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, I have this traditional question I ask to every first-time appearing guest, and it's the following. What is your most heretical, so one could say contrarian, view on the monetary system today? And this might be a very easy one for you, I guess.
Wow. I mean, on the monetary system today is that we are at the end. And my most contrary view, people do not understand currency life cycle. So actually, I've never spoken to anybody else that really quite gets what I see. So I am a contrarian, absolutely. And it is that we are absolutely at the end of this fiat money life cycle, period, end of discussion, and I can prove it.
Mhm. Okay, perfect. So let's take this as a follow up then. What is your case then? If let's say you would take the most important arguments from what you just said now, what does someone need to hear and understand to understand that we are actually reaching this end cycle?
I think the most clear picture that I can show you comes actually from the Federal Reserve itself, because that's really almost pretty much the only country that I've come across that actually publishes the purchasing power of the consumer dollar here in the US. And if you look at that chart, there are two things that are very evident as soon as you look at it, and anybody has access to it. I don't have any special access. And that is number one, that it starts out a dollar's worth of purchasing power up here, and down at that bottom axis, axle is a big fat zero. So the Federal Reserve itself is actually telling you that this stuff has no value. Taking that same chart, it is quite easy to see that officially there's 3 cents left out of the original purchasing power of the dollar. So I could tell the whole story. I mean, I love my charts and graphs because I like to do things visibly as well as verbally. But if you said you can only ever use one chart, that would be the one that I use, because I could tell the entire story of the currency's life cycle from that one chart. But that's it. So what happens when you get to zero?
Hmm. Well, that's also a bit like the reason why we also see, I think, sound money like gold, silver appreciating so much. In that case, today we are the 28th of January. A few days ago, the silver price broke the $100 per ounce mark, and the gold price also broke another big milestone, the $5,000 per ounce mark. Um, a lot of people are saying that are experts, especially in the sound money camp, or people who believe in sound money, say that gold and also silver, but especially gold, are fire alarms that do show
Mhm,
the
mhm.
debasement of the system itself. Do you think, how do you interpret the price? So the behavior of how much gold and silver and also other precious metals have appreciated recently. What does it say about the environment we are in, and how far can this go?
Well, number one, it is not gold and silver appreciating. It is the value of the currency going away. And this is really only held together with public confidence. So that's number one. Number two, how in the world do you know whether or not you should buy, hold, or liquidate any asset if you do not know its true fundamental value, not intrinsic value, which is Wall Street wants you to believe that they're giving you good price discovery? That's just a lie, and it's simply not true. You need to be able to, I don't care what it is, you need to be able to understand its true fundamental value. And therefore, do I want to buy it? Do I want to hold it? Do I want to liquidate it? So, how do you know what that is? Well, it takes a teeny weeny bit of nuance, and you can do this for any asset at all. Remember the Federal Reserve purchasing power chart, and they said the fundamental value of a dollar is zero, which means anything that can only be converted into that fiat money, into that government debt-based money, that's the real trend, right? Not them going up in terms of zeros, because that's what people look at psychologically. It's manipulation. It really is. What can you convert it into? I have a $10 trillion Zimbabwe note right here. You do know what I can buy with this. Absolutely nothing, right? But I'm a trillionaire in Zimbabwe. So I think it's critically important. How is money created? Everybody smiles when I pull out my money gun. But money in this system is created from debt. And since most countries, including the US, stopped publishing its M3 back in 2006, I take all the debt and I use that as a proxy for all the fiat money that's been printed. And I do it globally because this is a global issue. So according to the IFF, that the most current number that I pulled was $313 trillion in bonds. That means that's how much of this crap was created. And then there's a finite amount of gold because it's physical. Now, digital gold, like spot contracts, there's an unlimited amount. But when you go into the physical world, there is a finite amount of it. And you simply divide all the debt by all the gold, and then that tells you what this is really worth, because its most important function, it performs a lot of functions, but its most important function is to hold its value intact over time. And that is exactly the function that it's performed before, and why you see both spot silver and spot gold moving the way that it is because we are inside of a structural shift since we're at the end of this currency's life cycle. And that structural shift is away from the US paper markets, those contracts of which, well, according to the Bank of International Settlements, before they changed the formulas, for every 1 ounce of physical gold that existed, there had been 62,000 ounces of derivative gold. And that was 2009. So how much there is now? I don't know. But the markets read it as if it exists. So at any rate, when we go back to this physical world, you divide the debt by all the gold, and that gives you a number which is about $38,000 in change. And gold is the primary currency metal. Silver is the secondary currency metal. That puts, and at a 20-to-1 ratio, which long before 1913, it was a 15-to-1 ratio. But when we went into the new system, it was a 20-to-1 ratio. In fact, this is a little 20th of an ounce of gold, a $1 gold coin to a $1 silver coin. So that puts that fundamental value at about $1,800. So at $5,000 or $5,400 or $20,000 or $30,000, it's a bargain. What we're really experiencing right now at the end of this currency's life cycle is the really death of Wall Street's price discovery mechanism, which is a trading mechanism. And we are shifting. We've been doing this about a year so far. We're shifting into where the physical, actual, I don't know, what a concept, supply and demand dynamics are coming into play. And so what we're seeing, because you can look at the premiums all over the world, right? And to what we're saying here in the US. So there is a shift where we're going to get the price discovery from true supply and demand dynamics. But that is another indication that we are at the end and that the central banks and the governments are losing control. Because why, with their ability to just create as much digital silver and gold that never will exist, why aren't we still looking at spot gold at $200 an ounce and spot silver at $1 or $5, right? It's easy to manipulate these markets. So that's really, yeah, that's what's happening. And that's how much it's truly worth. Now, that's on a one-to-one basis, but people should keep in mind that when all confidence is lost, the way that governments attempt to regain your confidence and at least make it appear that hyperinflation is calming down is by revaluing this garbage that has no intrinsic value and is only used in one place, the financial system. And they revalue it against this, which is all intrinsic value and used in at least 33 different areas. 33 separate entities have demand for gold. 36 or so, that's just what I could count so far, for silver. So this is what makes sound money sound money. This is what makes gold and silver above all governments and central bankers, because they're used in every single sector of the global economy. 33, 36, 1. 1. Now, this is a physical representation of Bitcoin, right? It's just an algorithm. Don't you find it kind of interesting that they made it look like gold? And most of the cryptocurrencies are either gold, silver, or platinum. Why? Why aren't they chartreuse or pink or purple or green? Because they want you to think of this as digital gold. They want you to think that it's just as safe as this. It's not. And I mean, we are at such an interesting juncture right now because we just saw a big kahuna at Jefferies come out and say, sell Bitcoin, buy gold. That's Wall Street. That is Main Wall Street, right? Yeah, exactly. Shocking. Why did he say that? Because quantum computing is closer than they thought that it was, and quantum computing can break all the cryptography to the current cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. And so they're not so safe and secure. So there is a shift. Yeah, go ahead.
The counter argument to that would be a Bitcoiner saying that they could implement ways on updates into the Bitcoin network that would actually be a counter quantum mechanism that would already incorporate elements to actually detect such decryption that would then put at risk all the private keys on the Bitcoin network. So that is kind of like the same logic as a.
I hope so. Right? We don't know that yet. This was born in January of 2009. This was born in March of 2009, quantitative easing. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe it comes from the NSA 1996 white paper. And the NSA is a U.S. government agency, How to Create a Mint. It's a very interesting read. You see a lot of things from that paper that have been adopted in this arena. And no doubt, when one monetary system dies, another must be born. Gold and silver are your bridge from the one to the other to hold your purchasing power intact and then have the ability to take advantage. Number one, sustain your current standard of living, which is critically important, but then to protect whatever fiat money wealth you've managed to accumulate, because the real trend in that stuff is what's happening in the dollar, and the dollar is very near zero, if not really there. The only reason why we don't know that yet is because the public still has some confidence. But along the way, all of that leverage and debt that's in the system that bid up a lot of these assets, real estate, income-producing assets, even the cryptos. I'm not saying they're going away. They're not going away. They're here. Wall Street has adopted it, and certainly governments and central banks and corporations are adopting it in a very big way. It's not going away, but it will get a whole lot cheaper, and we'll see who'll survive. That's what we don't know yet. Who's going to survive? I mean, if I had a guess, I'd certainly think that Bitcoin would, because Wall Street has keenly adopted it. For anybody to think that it's outside of the system, though, there is this bridge in Brooklyn that I don't really own, but I'd sell it to you because you might be, vulnerable to that. But my point is that I'm patient and I know history and I know what a currency life cycle issue looks like. And these transitions are not easy for most people. Globally, on average, 80% of the population ends up in abject poverty. In Venezuela, in Zimbabwe, that number is 90%. But I didn't say 100%, did I? It's a wealth transfer mechanism, and you want to be in the right place at the right time with the right asset and also be appropriately diversified. I'm not saying don't buy Bitcoin or don't hold cryptocurrencies. Tether particularly has a huge hoard of gold. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying make sure that you're appropriately diversified so that you put yourself in a position, what if I'm right? What if I'm wrong? You don't want it to matter whether you're right or wrong. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think it's a very good point. That this is like a form of monetary health insurance in a way, one
Exactly.
could say, and
Absolutely.
or life insurance, not health insurance, but life insurance.
Mhm.
And it brings me to also like thinking, because I want to go back onto your calculation of the 30,000 per ounce. If
Mhm.
I'm correct, that would mean that the market cap of gold would approximately be around the 208 trillion dollars, which is roughly four times bigger than the U.S. Treasury market,
Mhm.
which is quite quite significant already. What kind of world would this then look like then? What would would this be then already a gold standard or gold anchored? Like how would you then see it and put it into perspective and context of how this constellation would look like?
Well, first of all, we need a big enough crisis to push everybody in that direction, right? And so and governments, I mean, let's face it, governments around the world have grown so much debt. It's not that it's not sustainable. It hasn't been sustainable in a very long time. It's not payable. So every single country has a gold revaluation account. Um, I hear them talk about it and, oh, because spot has gone to 5,000, then we could use the gold revaluation account to get rid of the debts because we have to go into a new system. And how are they going to justify creating money? So we can come back to that in just a second here. But in order to really take care of all of those debts, you don't want it at Wall Street's manipulated market. You want it at the fundamental value. And I can prove that's the way they do it. Over 4,800 currencies do not exist anymore. And that's how it's done every single time. So I'm sorry to tell you this, but I foresee a global hyperinflationary depression. And that's where community comes in, really important, because we have to come together. In local community, food becomes the single biggest issue for people through these transitions. So we have to come together in local community to be as independent and self-sufficient as we possibly can. And we need to create surety in food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, and shelter. And community can help you do that because there's power in numbers in a local place. So everybody brings whatever talents, gifts, assets that they have to the table to support the community, and that's how you can get through it on a local basis. But on a global basis, this is my big battle. This is my life's mission. I didn't realize it was my life's mission, but I could see this is my life's mission. If I have my druthers in this next iteration of, and it can be a digital currency, that's fine. That's fine. That we have a component of redeemable gold inside of it. Because when you as a citizen could walk in to any bank with this gold certificate and walk out with this 1-ounce piece of gold, what that did was the public had the power. So if you didn't like what you saw your government doing or your central banker doing, you just pulled the gold out of the system, and that created restrictions around how much debt they could grow and how much they could devalue the currency. So the public had the power. And redeemable. Because look at Zimbabwe. They have now the ZIM, their 6th iteration of currency. And yet they came out with it in April and did a 44% overnight devaluation in October. Why? Because there's nothing to hold their toes to the fire. You and I cannot guarantee that they actually have all the gold. But even if they do, it's not redeemable. It's not in physical form. You can't even get a bill. But for a minute there, they did issue 1-ounce gold coins. Who do you think could afford those to protect themselves from all of this garbage? So, unfortunately, if we don't do something, then I see us going into a full surveillance economy because I am not a code writer. I am not an engineer. I don't understand that code. So what does that mean? That means I can be taken advantage of. And seriously, when you stop and think about it, inflation was part of the plan in this fiat money system. So but the problem is that when it runs too hot, people notice and they lose confidence. And this is a Ponzi scheme, so they need to maintain the confidence, right? Now, we go into a digital surveillance system with no level of checks and balances for the public. I can't sit here and tell you that that code is not written to remove my principal at a level that I don't notice it. because that's what actually the central banker's real job is to regulate the rate and speed of inflation. That's their job. They need to keep it low enough to create what they call price stability. Now, you and I would hear price stability, and what do we think? We think that gallon of milk is the same price over time. That's price stability. But that's not the definition of central bankers' price stability. Their definition is inflation at a low enough level that you don't pay attention to it and change your buying patterns. Rather, to maintain your standard of living, you take on more and more and more debt, which then creates more and more and more money in the system, which then devalues the money that's already out there. And then they repay those debts in the US, but this is true anywhere in the world, with currencies like my $10 trillion Zimbabwe note that have absolutely zero value. Well, we actually utilize that strategy. I have a sound money strategy that I developed for myself because I've studied currency life cycles since 1987, and we employ that for all of our clients at Zang Enterprises. And it's built on layers, so just depending upon what you're trying to accomplish.
So if we now look at the way, because you've mentioned hyperinflation, and a lot of analysts or experts are pretty well known the Japanification effect of the financial world or the monetary system is, I think, very on topic, especially today. Especially if we look at the 10-year yields of the JGB, which flirted with I think the almost 4%. It was 3.8 and increased by 50 basis points within just a week. There's a real confidence crisis. And Japan is one example, and maybe you can give me other examples, but let's focus on Japan for the sake of the conversation. Is that what is Japan telling us about the future?
Well, I actually think this is like such an incredibly interesting topic because you're absolutely right. Japan has been the leader in showing other governments how to do this whole alphabet soup of manipulation. But they own 90% of the Nikkei. They own over 52% of the government bonds. And yet we are inside of a global crisis. I mean, they're like this hair's breadth away from triggering a global crisis with their long bonds going to the highest levels since they ever came out. That is showing a loss of confidence. And seriously, what does every con game require? Two key things. Confidence, that's number one. That is the tippy top number one. Because when that confidence is gone, you have nothing. And number two, new money. So Japan, and not just Japan, the U.S., this is a wake-up. It should be a wake-up call for everybody, except that we've gone too far, that there really is no way out other than a major crisis and a shift into a new system. And that digital system in the U.S., where we're trying to make it stablecoins, and there's lots around that. But, I mean, it looked great when they were in there buying to control the price levels with Japanese stock market making all-time highs. They're in the melt-up phase, right? I think we're in the melt-up phase. I've been talking about that for probably 6-7 months now. And they're in the melt-up phase. And why? I mean, think about it. The U.S., I think the S&P just broke to all-time records when Main Street can't afford groceries for their families and they have to borrow in 4 easy payments, which aren't so easy if you have to do that every week to feed their families. So there's this huge global disconnect, but I think that solvency might matter again. Affordability matters again. That's been this huge thing. Shocking. People can't afford to feed their families and they don't like it. I don't know why you would think they would love that. But affordability matters again, and responsibility, valuations actually are mattering again, and not just in Japan. But look you bought up the whole market, you bought up all the bonds, and you're still in trouble now? You cannot fix a too much debt problem with even more debt, and yet that's the only thing that they have. This is it. This is what they have. That's it.
Sorry to interrupt this episode, but I'd like to tell you more about what we do at GoldRepublic. At GoldRepublic, we provide physical gold, silver, and platinum, fully insured, fully in your name, fully allocated, in top-tier vaults, securely saved in Amsterdam, Zurich, and Frankfurt. No paper promises, just real ownership, full transparency on your name. We are fully regulated and conduct regular independent audits of our vaults with more than 700 million euros of precious metals under custody and 70,000 investors that trust us in the last 15 years. Our top-rated app gives you full control. Track live prices, explore detailed charts, and buy or sell in just a few taps. Whether you're hedging against inflation, currency risks, or financial stability, at GoldRepublic, we offer real assets to safeguard your generational wealth. So, I think the Fed also just did like a rate check or something like this to actually purchase yen. Also just recently in a desperate attempt. Yes.
Yeah, shocking. Every central bank intervenes in the currency markets, in the foreign exchange markets. They always have, they always will. It's just very quiet so that you don't know, but it's just the lie. And I'm glad you brought that up because we hear about the weak or the strong dollar. President Trump wants a weak dollar, right? But there are times when you hear, oh, the dollar is really strong or the dollar is really weak. That's relative. That's relative to other currencies. It doesn't mean anything. What matters to you and me is not whether or not the dollar is weaker or stronger against the yen, which, by the way, it's weaker. Okay, what does that tell you? What really matters is what we can convert this stuff into. Food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. We have to become our own central bankers, have a foundation of sound money, do anything else you want. Just get your foundation built, right? You want to, if you're building a house, do you want a rickety foundation that has lots of gaps and holes in it? No, your house is going to implode. This is your solid foundation to self-sovereignty. And then that anchors you. Silver is really the fuse. Gold is really the anchor, and we can get into that if you want to. But once you have a nice solid foundation, build as high as you want, take as much risk as you want. You just make sure that you're appropriately diversified. So what if I'm right and what if I'm wrong? If you don't do that, you're just working on hopium. And hopium is not a very good plan. You like my props, don't you?
I love it. I was about to say, I've never seen this before in an interview. It's like a show. It's literally a show.
Exactly.
I love it. I love it.
The reality is what I talk about is ugly and nasty, although there are so many opportunities inside of it if you're at the right place at the right time with the right asset. I try and lighten it up a little bit and be entertaining so that you can absorb what I'm trying to show you.
I appreciate that. So talking about opportunities then, but first of all, actually, I wanted to pick your brain maybe on the stablecoins because you've just mentioned that, and there's different theories about this, but also very explicit, let's say, frameworks or intent in using stablecoins as one way to funnel demand for treasuries, which is still very low. The appetite is still very low. The auctions are doing miserable, and it's seen as one more way of like softening the fall in a way. How do you interpret that, and how do you also see this in, let's say, in the matrix of risks, right? That's a portrait also around this in terms of also control. You've mentioned CBDCs, a way to kind of also include like a more control-based dollar, but then worldwide, not just in the US. What's your analysis
Mhm.
around this?
Well, number one, I was born in 1954, which means I was there when President Johnson took the silver out of our coinage. And I was there in 1971 when Nixon confiscated gold from the rest of the world the last time. In the US, it's been confiscated 5 times. 1971 was the last time. So, having lived through that and experienced what the level of chaos that was happening around it, this is a much bigger level of chaos than I've ever personally experienced, and I was there during the I wasn't in Vietnam, but I mean, I was a teenager then, so I know what that looks like. So, I could sit here and I could tell you without one little doubt in my mind, and this is my opinion, that when President Trump signed the Genius Act, which was the first legislation to legalize the digital assets, that what he actually did was change the global monetary system. We just don't know it yet, but it's done. And I personally believe that the way that the stablecoin system is set up, just like 1913 and 14, it is corporate debt that will create the new money, because we have to go back to that. In all of the things that I've read over the years, I kept asking the question, okay, what's going to justify the new money in the system? What's going to justify it? And the only thing that I kept coming back with from the Bank for International Settlements or the IMF or the World Bank or any of these guys was that it was either going to be debt, which means you got to get rid of the unpayable debt first. There's your hyperinflation, get rid of it. And the gold revaluation, get rid of it. And also purchases. Well, once he signed that, my question was answered. It's going to be a combination of the two, because to your point, this is just like the petrodollar created an artificial market for the debt-backed dollar. So too, the stable coins would actually give that artificial demand. That's what President Trump is trying to do, is create artificial demand for dollars and for treasuries. And the stable coins, I mean, anybody can issue a stable coin, right? President Trump's party just or company just issued, I think, I don't know, 500 billion or whatever it is. So my personal feeling on it, and we'll see if I'm going to either be right or wrong, is that the stable coins will be used to engineer and generate the hyperinflation, which I personally believe, based upon the monetary velocity, has actually already begun. It's just not yet publicly visible. Yeah.
Well,
And by the way, I would say this, anytime they name anything like a stable coin, it is actually just the opposite.
it makes me also think about if we, let's say, measure the Dow Jones in gold, and we look up at the
Mhm.
chart, the Dow Jones to gold ratio. We've just crossed a key level, and there's been only 4 times in history that those levels have been reached. And this was like the Banking Act of 1933, the convertibility of the dollar in 1971, and the Economic Stabilization Act of 2008. And that ratio now is at around 9.8 or something like this. What does so you've also alluded to this now, and so one could actually say the Digital Act might be that what we read then in the history books 10 years from now, 20 years from now. But what other signs or what other things are telling you that we're entering a new era? And by that, I also want to point out to the other acts, the Strategic Critical Minerals Act that has been passed, and the repatriation of actual key strategic minerals that the US and NATO countries do need for their own survival. How would you describe that part?
Well, whenever there is a monetary shift, there is always a lot of chaos around it. So we always see war. I don't know. Are we already in World War III? Kind of feels like it, doesn't it? And supposedly that's been going on in cyberspace, which is above my pay grade. But there are some that have been going on for a long time. You also typically have issues around, well, let's see, how do I say this? Civil rights. Okay. There are a lot of issues around women's movements, civil rights, and and with inflation, there's always issues around inflation. Let's see, there's always energy issues. So what we're really witnessing, and you just kind of brought it up in the Dow to gold ratio, what did all of those dates have in common? It was a monetary regime shift. I knew it in 2008. The system died. Shearson was my alma mater. That's where I was a stockbroker and learned about currency life cycles. So I was watching it like a hawk then. And I do consider myself a bit of a technician. And so, I couldn't have told you 1 second before it went out that it was going out. But as soon as that happened, I was getting ready to retire at that point, right? I was a little 2-bedroom condo, lock the door, off I go, travel the world, learn how to cook, learn art, just kind of relax, take a chill pill. And then 2008 happened, and that changed everything. And instead of retiring, because I've been born for this moment in time, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm never going away until I'm not on the planet anymore. But instead, what I did was I bought a house, and I'm in dead central Phoenix, right in the middle of the city, but I've got a half an acre, and I became an urban farmer. Because food is the single biggest issue that faces people during this transition, and I don't like it when people are hungry. If I could feed the world, I would. So, and I'm not a gardener, I'm not a farmer, well, I wasn't, I should say. I wasn't. Now I am. But, you know, I then started my prepping journey because I knew that I had to be, yes, I'd been accumulating gold and silver, but all those other areas, that mantra was developed from how I developed this area here. Food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. But then 2020 hit. And 2020, you couldn't, here in the US, the grocery store shelves went barren, right? You couldn't get anything from them. But I'm walking around my gardens so I couldn't get avocados. I have chickens, I had eggs, I've got fish, I've got crawfish, I've got vegetables, I've got fruit, right? Didn't bother me at all. And I'm walking around going, ho, 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 look at how smart I am. Until there were riots at the Capitol, which is pretty near my house, and riots near my children's house, which is also in a very nice area. We were talking about you just need to stay out of the bad areas. Well, no, neither one of these are bad areas. And yet we saw a rise of riots. And I went, oh, there's the hole. And so then I went on a quest to find a very remote bug out location that was close enough for me to be able to get to, but far enough away and remote enough so that's actually what I did. And I have 41 acres on the top of a mountain, and I am executing that strategy there. It is completely off grid. It's all on solar. I do have some gas backup, but it's all on solar, and I put in orchards, and we're building out fields and growing food, and I've got long storage stuff up there. And I mean, I'm just a regular person, just like anybody else, except I see what's coming and I see what's here. You know, you need a community. I'm preparing for at least 40 people, but like I just said to Natalie this morning, whoever needs to come, we'll figure it out. I've got enough land. We can hunt. We can do whatever. I've got water. I own the water rights. I sit on top of an aquifer. We have to be as self-sufficient and independent, but do it inside of community. Because what I've seen in all the years that I've been alive is that loss of empathy. that divide and conquer mechanism where everybody is so polarized. If you say something that you disagree with me, I hate your guts. No, we can't do that. We really have to listen to everybody and then go inside and do a check. How does that feel to you? Does that feel right? We need to learn to trust our gut. Does that feel right? Does that feel wrong? Because even if we disagree, let me tell you, I will support your right to verbalize and come out with any thoughts that you have, even if I don't like them. Because if I take your rights away, guess what happens to my rights? We have to come together to counter this, period. Community, yes, I'm a huge advocate for sound money. Why? Because it puts the power back in the people's hands. That's why. It enables you to be independent and self-sovereign. What a concept. It supports every foundation for sound money. It is easily a unit of measure so you can price stuff, a tool of barter, you give me this, I'll give you that, a short-term store of value to make sure that I'm fairly paid for my labor today, and a long-term store of value so that no matter when I use this money, I'm always fairly paid for the labor that originally created it. This system, by design, mimics three of those functions. But is it a long-term store of value? No. And by the way, it's even iffy if you're getting fairly paid, since depends on how long you've been working for this money, it's constantly losing value through inflation, right? Once we go to this system, that eliminates two. Because what the central banks have said over and over and over again, there are two benefits. Well, there are more than two benefits for them. But the key benefit for the government in going to a digital currency is that they can do lifetime taxation. Everything flows through them and they can control you. If you don't like what they're doing and you verbalize it, boom, you're cut off. Look what they did with the trucker strike in Canada. And Canada, that's our neighbor, and they don't even like us anymore, right? But when those truckers struck, which was an legal and peaceful, boom, they shut down all their bank accounts, all their insurance, everything. And if you donated $5 so that they could go buy some lunch, your accounts were shut down as well. And that was before we're even fully inside of this digital system. You need to pay attention to this stuff. My mom always said, they'll show you who you are. Believe them. So they're showing you, I mean, everybody is, they're showing you who they are. Believe them. Don't go, oh no, that's not real. Believe it. So inside of this digital system for central banks, what they say is once we are on a digital system, there are no limitations to how low we can push interest rates. Well, negative rates were tested in 2009, and basically we're at ZERP for 15 years. Japan, that's part of the problem that Japan is having. They were in negative rates for so long. But what we're seeing with that, what are negative rates? People don't understand it. Once you get all the purchasing power out of the currency, what do you have next? The principal. That's what I'm talking about with the digital currencies, because they can attack your principal. Like with dollars, what do you have? You have 1.00. And maybe on some things they'll go out another point, another digit. But in digital currencies, there are no limitations, right? So they can remove your principal at a slow enough rate that you don't see it until it's too late. We need to take our power back. We just do.
Oh, beautiful conclusion, Lynette. I have to say, I totally agree also with you. I think it's very important to not just think about this monetary life insurance as we just talked about earlier, but also your physical one and the one with food and farming. I think perfectly makes sense, and I think a lot of people are actually starting to wake up to this reality.
Yeah.
Biological, pesticide-free, healthy foods, so that you can also just nourish your body and just stay alive. Well, at all, and the sense of community. I think it's obviously like also paramount to
Right.
all of that. So very inspiring. Thank you, Lynette. I want to ask you a follow-up question about confiscation of gold, but we don't have time anymore, so I'll keep this for our next interview, I hope. And
I hope so too.
I'll thank you a lot for your time, your wisdom, and all your props. I mean, again, one of a kind.
Thank you so much. This has been great.